The mystery about Ricky Nelson has finally been solved, and it is ugly. Ricky Nelson was born Eric Hilliard Nelson on May 8, 1940, in Teaneck, New Jersey. The son of two entertainers of the time, A.Z. and Harriet Nelson, Ricky was basically born into show business. He had been exposed to the world of entertainment since he was a baby, first appearing with his family on the long-running radio and television series, The Adventures of A.Z. and Harriet, a chronicle of the Nelson family's day-to-day existence that was part of most American households in the early 50s and into the 60s. As Ricky grew up in front of millions of viewers on television, he instantaneously became an audience favorite with fans as a result of his charm, good looks, and unmistakable talent. Ricky should have been like many child actors that would have been stuck as a sitcom star in a limiting role, but he literally made it out, and by doing so, began an extraordinarily successful musical career. The time Ricky emerged on the scene, rock and roll still was not publicly accepted by older generations, and yet he became one of the most respected and enduring figures in music history. In 1957, he recorded his first single, I'm Walking, which was a cover of Fats Domino's hit, and it quickly topped the charts. This was the beginning of his parallel career as a rock and roll singer, as well as making him a teen idol on his own. After 1957, Ricky Nelson had hit after hit with tracks like Hello Mary Lou, Traveling Man, Poor Little Fool, Lonesome Town, and It's Late. With his smooth, melodic voice and clean-cut image, Ricky Nelson helped make rock music palatable to mainstream audiences, and he became extremely popular with his dedicated fan base. He was among the first teen stars to appear regularly on national television, introducing rock music to millions of Americans in their homes. This was significant in that it paved the way for later acts like the Beatles to reach the same audiences. By the time he was 21 years old, he had already sold millions and established himself as one of the top-selling male solo artists of his era. However, Ricky Nelson would not be without struggles. As musical tastes were changing during the mid-1960s, Nelson found it increasingly tough to remain on the top of the charts. Rather than go the route of following trends, he decided to make his own art, shifting his artistically to a more mature country rock sound, and involved he and his band with the country rock genre. This led to founding the Stone Canyon Band, who could be considered the originators of country rock, a style some years later used by the Eagles. In 1972, he released the reflective single Garden Party, which became a huge comeback hit. Garden Party was inspired by disappointing reception, a Madison Square Garden concert that wanted only his old hits. The song became a rebellious anthem about artistic integrity and personal honesty. A message of, you can't please everyone, so you've got to please yourself. In addition to his impressive career as a recording artist, Ricky Nelson also had very meaningful presence in film and television, proving himself to be a versatile performer as an actor and singer. His film journey opened in 1952 with the family comedy Here Come the Nelsons, a film based on the premise of The Popular Family. In just a year's time, Nelson acted a minor role in the love story of Three Loves, 1953, which was an MGM production directed by the legendary Vincente Minnelli. For this film, Nelson played a younger version of Farley Greer's character, showing off his early skill of bringing characters to life on the big screen. Nelson's on-screen popularity would steadily continue to grow with his success in music, and the wildly popular television show, The Adventures of A.Z. and Harriet, leading major Hollywood directors to take notice of him. One of the more defining moments of his film career came in 1959, when legendary director Howard Hawks cast him a gunslinger in the classic western Rio Bravo. Nelson's part, while less than major in profile, added raw energy to the film, and that might have been instrumental in the film's box office surprise. Howard Hawks credited Nelson's magnetic on-screen presence as a large part of the film's top-dollar box office gain. Nelson kept his acting credentials going by sharing the screen with stars. In 1960, he co-starred with the popular Jack Lemmon in The Wackiest Ship in the Army. This comedy war film was so successful, they created a television show from it. Although Nelson did not reprise his role for the television series, Nelson was always up for any chance he could to explore new roles, even if it was for guest spots, such as General Electric Theater, and his episode The Wish Book, in an effort to stretch his acting range past his fame as a musician. His first lead was in 1965 with Love and Kisses, a romantic comedy, which was a special family business for Nelson, written and directed by his father, A.Z. Nelson. The film starred Jack Kelly. Ricky Nelson was able to mix his acting, charm, and musical talents together in this sincere and entertaining feature. Nelson's TV guest spots became a consistent aspect of his career as the late 60s and 70s progressed. He even played the much-maligned outlaw Jesse James in an episode of Hondo, appeared alongside old-timers Walter Brennan and Pat O'Brien in the nostalgic western The Over the Hill Gang, 1969, and continued to guest on various hit series including Malloud, Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law, Petrocelli, The Streets of San Francisco, and A Twist in the Tale. One of his best-remembered guest roles was in The Hardy Boys' Nancy Drew Mysteries, when he played Tony Eagle in an episode that featured his singing several hits, which obviously made his fans happy in both his music and acting. Nelson also made an appearance on the classic The Love Boat. In the 1980s, Nelson continued to have supporting roles in various made-for-TV movies, including 3 on a Date and the teen comedy High School USA 1983, showing that his perennial charisma and talent kept him on esteemed fine in all facets of entertainment. Through both film and television work, Ricky Nelson's acting career was a colorful and energetic aspect of his diverse artistic legacy. Just as Ricky Nelson became widely recognized as one of the teen idols of America, while still in his teenage years, he had millions of people enamored and captivated by the clean-cut boy, handsome, smooth voice, and boyish exuberance while he was singing. With the fame came considerable attention from boy-crazed girls everywhere, and as expected, along with the fame came admirers and girls who wanted to be with Ricky Nelson. And of course, so did Ricky. Like most teenager boys, Ricky wanted to explore relationships and dated a number of girls and women throughout the early years of his life. Even in this period of teen stardom, Ricky's association with women and his newfound fame as an actor, he still had to consider his mother, Harriet Nelson, and what she wanted in regard to his affairs. Harriet Nelson was more than a motherly influence, because she was also Ricky's lead co-star on the long-running television series The Family did, called The Adventures of A.Z. and Harriet. She believed strongly in decorum and propriety, and believed the most important thing was keeping Ricky's public image honorable, especially exposed to the media in Hollywood. Harriet did not like many of the young women Ricky was connected with, as she felt they never quite met her expectations for what she thought her son should be romantically involved with. She was concerned about class, decorum, and Ricky's career path. She believed Ricky ought to be concentrating solely on building a lasting and honorable career in music and acting, rather than risking a sidetrack from his path, chasing some kind of romance. Perhaps she was motivated by maternal protectiveness, as well as her understanding of how the fame train can take young stars off course. Despite his desire to please his mother, Ricky often felt torn between doing what he wanted and what was expected of him in a business sense. This was a constant struggle throughout his teenage and early adult life. But eventually, Ricky fell in love with a girl who he thought would appease Harriet, Kristen Chris Harmon. The two wed in April of 1963, with a great deal of press surrounding the wedding as it united two of America's families. Chris was the daughter of Tom Harmon, a Heisman Trophy-winning football star, and Elise Knox, a film star from the 1940s. The Harmons had known the Nelsons for a long time and were good friends, so everyone felt this marriage constituted a worthwhile union. Two child actors from Hollywood royalty coming together in a fairy tale marriage, according to many of their fans, and their families had a strong connection through their public and entertainment lives. And in many ways, this marriage represented a continuation of their respective legacies. Ricky and Chris ultimately brought 4 children into the world. Their first child, Tracy Christine Nelson, was an actress like her father and held recurring roles in television shows and films like Father Dowling Mysteries. Then, Chris gave birth to twin sons, Gunnar Eric Nelson and Matthew Gay Nelson, who were as musically talented and charming as their father. In the early 1990s, the twins enjoyed commercial success with their rock band Nelson, which became the first ever family act to have three generations of hitmakers. Their hit song, Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection, was #1 on the Billboard charts in 1990. The couple's last child, Sam Hilliard Nelson, named after Ricky's father A.Z. Nelson's middle name Hilliard, also went on to work in the arts because of his parents. But he did not get into the spotlight like his brothers and sister. Although the family appeared perfect, Ricky and Chris's marriage continued to have growing pains. As each year went by, the stress and pressure ramped up after the arrival of their last child. As differences in lifestyle, personal development, and emotional distance grew exponentially between them, Ricky's touring schedule, followed by his want to revive his music career, would take him on the road, while Chris seemed to struggle with the obligations and pressures of family life. There had been rumors of infidelity and growing emotional disconnectedness. Before long, there was a disintegration in private of what was once a glamorous union of two public figures under the pressure of personal issues and conflicting priorities. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the music couple's relationship had deteriorated, leading to their separation and ultimately a long and painful legal dissolution for custody, financial compensation, and public goodwill. Their divorce was finalized in December 1982, marking the end of almost 20 years of marriage. While the legal proceedings were punishing on both Ricky and Chris, they were both committed to their children and did their best to provide them stability amid their family disarray. Ricky in particular was hit hard by the end of the marriage, which likely influenced some of more melancholic aspects of his later music. For decades, fans of Ricky Nelson, teenage idol, rock and roll trailblazer, and television star have speculated about the particulars of his tragic and early death. While some information surfaced early, and many questions remained. Was it indeed a mechanical failure of the aircraft that resulted in the crash killing him? Was there something more alarming behind the circumstances of that fateful flight on December 31st, 1985? The mystery surrounding Nelson's death became a microcosm of the decades of interest and sadness. Now, after years of research, professional scrutiny, and brand new eyewitness and insider accounts, the entire account has developed as clearly as it ever will. And frankly, it isn't a happy ending. At the core of this story is the little DC-3 that Ricky and his buddies were flying in for their New Year's Eve gig in Dallas, Texas. It was reported early on that a number of circumstances may have initiated a mechanical failure, a heater, or an electrical short, which could have resulted in a fire on board the aircraft that made the plane go down outside of Dallas, Texas. Specifically, the plane triggered fire midair. The pilot survived, but unfortunately, Ricky Nelson and his fiancée Helen Blair, as well as 5 of the band members, died in the fire. Following the event, speculation was rampant, from drug use to maintenance failure, and implications of sabotage and conspiracy. It is safe to say that the vicinity of the event was purposely shrouded in ambiguity for a number of years. Although the National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the fire began in the cabin area, likely from a malfunctioning heater, they could not determine the ignition source. At the same time, speculation was rampant in tabloids and among fan circles. Rumors that the pilots had drug paraphernalia on board also gave way to darker narratives that many thought unfairly vilified Nelson. Toxicology tests apparently found no drugs or alcohol in Nelson's system, and there was no evidence that drugs caused the fire. But the ambiguity lasted for decades and served to leave an open wound for his family and a haunting question mark for eager fans. What ultimately brought some measure of closure were a series of investigative breakthroughs made possible by the tireless efforts of aviation historians, forensic analysts, and journalists, who were not willing to give up the search for truth. They had discovered previously unexamined technical records. The combination of those records and new interviews with surviving pilots and aviation mechanics presented an altogether clearer and disturbing picture. The aircraft, a World War II vintage Douglas DC-3, and had been poorly maintained, and it was operating under questionable safety parameters. While the operation of the aircraft were well aware of the ongoing problems with the heater system, problems that had been noted as well as complained about on flights prior, they absolutely did not operate it in a reasonable way. More damning, the heater had been jury-rigged in such a manner that it was a time bomb with repairs that didn't even meet aviation standards. The heater was located just underneath the floorboards of the cabin, in close proximity to flammable materials. When the heater failed during flight, it sparked a fire that quickly filled the cabin with smoke and toxic fumes. The fire extinguisher that would typically be on board the aircraft did not exist, and neither did any fire retardant insulation, which left passengers little chance of survival. Ricky Nelson and others probably succumbed to smoke inhalation prior to the crash landing. The forensics reports indicated that the pilots were able to escape through the cockpit windows, but for everyone else in the cabin, it was simply too late. The most chilling realization was not simply that the fire was preventable, but that people involved in the operation of the aircraft knew it was dangerous and allowed it to fly anyway. In retrospect, the flight was a disaster waiting to happen. We've now solved our last mystery. How could someone so visible perish in such a preventable tragedy? Not the sort of closure one craves that feels peaceful and weighs heavily against gut-wrenching sadness and anger. Ricky Nelson was a loved entertainer who had been a child star and was now a musical legend. He didn't perish by fate or human cruelty or human failing, but simply through human stupidity and systematic failure. It is difficult to comprehend as the truth emerges, and it is painful to fathom a tragedy that could have been avoided, and to be reminded that even icons are victims of irresponsible human behavior on behalf of those who are supposed to assure their safety. Ricky Nelson's legacy as a cultural figure will endure, but the facts surrounding his death are a grim cautionary tale, a reminder that mysteries don't always provide consolation when they are solved. At times, they only serve to deepen the tragedy,